Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says the imperfect fight against proliferation. The article here is speaking about International Atomic Energy Agency. It looks into the background about the birth of this agency, what have been the achievements of this agency, and what have been the major limitations and criticisms with respect to this agency. First up, let's look into the background as to how this particular agency was created. When you look into the International Atomic Agency's origin, it can be traced back to an address of the former US President Dwight Eisenhower to the General Assembly of the United Nations in the year 1953. What was this speech all about? He said that this particular speech was to enlighten the American public and the global community about the risk and hopes that are associated with the nuclear energy. He says when it comes to the nuclear energy, it is good for the constructive purposes, but it can also be used for the destructive purposes as well. So the United States of America wants to use it for the constructive purpose and not the destructive purpose, says former US President Dwight Eisenhower. He goes on to say that countries should engage more in agreements and not in wars among all the nations which back then were engaging in nuclear activity. So this particular address was known as Atoms for Peace, and this was the organization's first name when it was formally established in the year 1957. From the preliminary examination point of view, do remember it is headquartered in Vienna, which is in Austria. The IAEA is an autonomous international organization within the United Nations system. What is the primary function or the mandate of the system? The primary mandate of the organization was and continues to be promoting safe, secure, and peaceful nuclear technology. What do we mean by this particular function? Basically, when you look into this agency, it promotes and assists the research and development when it comes to the peaceful development of the nuclear technology. So when you're employing the uranium or developing the nuclear technology, use it only for the advantageous purposes. This should not be used for the destructive purposes. This should not be against the humanity and the mankind, as we saw in Japan. And as a result, what this agency believes in is in safeguarding the nuclear energy only for the constructive purposes, research and development for the peaceful use of nuclear technology, and not for the military purposes. That happens to be the primary function of this particular agency. While performing this particular duty, it indirectly contributes to the peace and security in the world and helps in achieving the sustainable developmental goals. When it comes to the participation of India, India became a member in the year 1957 itself. The AIEA, along with its former Director General Mohammad El Bardai, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2005. Kindly remember these important pointers when it comes to the preliminary examination. Now, the importance of this particular article is about focusing what else have been the achievements of the AIEA and what have been the limitations of this particular agency. When we look into the primary functions, we did realize that it is promoting nuclear energy for the peaceful purposes. Apart from this, it also focuses on championing civil nuclear solution for the number of health related issues. So what does it do? It helps in diagnosing of the hepatitis B infection by simple, inexpensive and reliable nuclear detection methods. So it is not only about promoting nuclear energy for the electricity, but it is also for promoting health related aspects as well. In case the nuclear energy can be used for health related aspects, that is also being promoted by the International Atomic Energy Agency. The IAEA is also actively participating in all those issues of climate change and its variations as well. When it is looking into the concept of climate change, it looks at whether nuclear energy can be employed to mitigate the impact of climate change. It also works on the pandemic containment and in prevention of the zoonotic diseases as well. Apart from all these advantages, it has also helped in resolving number of crises and bridging differences between number of countries. When we look into the functioning of this particular agency, yes, we know for the fact that it does not operate independently. Only if that particular country allows for the inspection, that is when when this agency would be able to go and inspect whether that particular country is using the nuclear energy only for the peaceful purposes. Back in the 2000s, we had the rivalry between United States of America and Iraq. What exactly happened? United States of America said that there were nuclear operations that which were conducted in Iraq. But what did this agency do? Since it does not have a direct control on sovereign countries, it took a leadership. It said that you, the United States of America, you give us the evidence. That is when we would be able to see whether they are using it for the peaceful purposes or for the military purposes. Because it did not have the power to take on the might of the United States of America, its leadership in a subtle manner ensured that there was no issues between United States of America and Iraq. So what did it ask for? It asked for evidence from United States of America so that action can be initiated against Iraq. But unfortunately, this evidence and multiple other things did not matter for United States of America, and they still went ahead with the so-called war to prove that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. This is one such example where the International Atomic Energy Agency's leadership took on United States of America. The other example that we have to focus is in reference to the Iran nuclear deal. Yes, there was back channel diplomacy that was happening from United States of America so that Iran enters into the fold of Iran nuclear deal, or what we call as Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, in the year 2015. So this Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, yes, the back channel diplomacy might have been initiated by the United States of America, but who took the major in charge? It was the International Atomic Energy Agency and its leadership. So they struck a temporary deal with the Iran. They were able to inspect Iran's nuclear plants for about 3 months, which is what kept this particular process alive. On one side, we have United States of America under the Obama administration, which was able to convince, and at the same time it was the Atomic Energy Agency which was also able to take confidence of Iran, convince them so that they were also into the Iran nuclear deal. Such is the example of achievements or so-called advancements when it comes to mitigating the impact of the nuclear energy in the disastrous consequences or the military consequences. Apart from this, when we look into the limitations, what have been the limitations of this particular agency? Let's go back to the year 1980. United States of America was a close friend of Pakistan. Why? India was associated with Soviet Union back then. We had very good relationship with Soviet Union back then. But when it comes to the 1980s and much prior to that, we had the support for Pakistan which was coming from United States of America. So what do we have? In fact, there was cooperation between United States of America and Pakistan on the Afghan front. In fact, United States of America also had evidence that Pakistan had possession of the nuclear missiles during that particular period. This agency was not able to do anything with respect to Pakistan as they were conducting the nuclear operations for the destructive purposes and also for the military purposes. This happens to be one of the major limitations when it comes to Pakistan and United States of America. Apart from the Pakistan issue, we also have the North Korean issue as well. When we look into this particular agency, it has no authority to act on its own. Why? That is because it relies on the willingness of that particular country to cooperate when it comes to the agency and its activities, or it also depends on the UN mandate. Now, when we look into the North Korea part, what happens? United States of America was sure that North Korea has nuclear missiles, and at the same time, the International Atomic Energy Agency also confirmed that North Korea nuclear programs was not peaceful in nature but was being used for the military purposes. This is when it also became evident in the year 2002, and that is when the field operating agencies of this particular agency were asked to leave North Korea, and as a result, it is again not able to stop the military operations of the North Korean government. So what do we actually see? On one side, it was not able to stop Pakistan from conducting its military operations, and at the same time, when it comes to North Korea, again, in spite of evidence, it was not able to stop the nuclear activity in North Korea. Added to these limitations, one of the major criticisms is in terms of the 5 permanent members. We have United States of America, we have United Kingdom, we have Russia, we have France and China. All these countries possess the nuclear weapons. Has the agency spoken to them? Is it trying to bring an end to this nuclear warfare, or has it entered into a consensus so that they don't develop and upscale their productivity? While all this is not happening, it focuses on other countries and is not focusing on these five permanent members. Apart from this, there is also an allegation that is made by Iran against this particular agency. What is that allegation? Let's say, for example, when you're giving permission for the inspection of a particular machinery in a particular country, you would expect the inspection to happen in a transparent way. But what has Iran accused this agency of? It has said that its field agencies were engaged in espionage and they were conducting operations which was against the established standards of this very agency. And as a result, this article currently goes on to say that there have been some achievements when it comes to this agency, and at the same time there have been some criticisms when it comes to this particular agency. So addressing all these criticisms and limitations, giving it more autonomy and independence so that it can bring an end to the disastrous consequences of the nuclear energy, is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. There are two articles. One, it says, is India witnessing the beginning of the second wave? The other article says super spreaders and the rise in the COVID-19 cases. Both these articles is speaking about the second wave of COVID-19 rise. Let's try and understand what is this article all about. When we look into the context of this article, there are a number of experts who say that there has been a consistent increase in the last couple of weeks when it comes to the COVID-19 and the cases. So what do we actually see is the second wave of COVID-19, and at the same time there are few people who are opposing it as well. So the primary focus is that we understand what is the second wave of COVID-19. What is the second wave? In this particular parameter, let's say we have all seen the increase of COVID-19. So the numbers were increasing when it comes to the COVID-19. So there was a gradual increase of COVID-19 cases, and what we also saw was a dip when it comes to the COVID-19 and had become consistent as well. So the number of cases were not increasing, there were here and there cases as well. So people had assumed that there was a drop when it comes to the COVID-19, but all of a sudden what we are witnessing is a sudden rise in certain regions. Let's say, for example, Maharashtra, or in regions like Punjab, which is what is called as the second wave. So what is the second wave? There is resurgence of the infection in a particular area after the transmission had decreased over a period of time. That is what is called a second wave. Now when we look into the global community, globally nations in the Europe had witnessed a spike in the year 2020 in the month of May. So most of the countries in Europe had suffered a major problem when it comes to the COVID-19. That is when they also realized with time the COVID-19 incidences were also dropping as well. So after May 2020, where there was consistent increase of the COVID-19 cases, what we also saw was a drop after a few months, let's say in the month of September. But during this particular period, when there was a drop of COVID-19 cases, countries opened up their economy and they were conducting all their activities in a normal process. That is when November 2020, there was second wave that had struck the European countries. So all those countries which were not impacted in the first wave started suffering in the second wave, and at the same time countries like Italy, which had already suffered in the first wave, also started suffering in the second wave as well. This is where it started haunting the government very badly. The number of beds started increasing. COVID-19 patients also started suffering. We didn't have the vaccines in the window as well. So these people were hit very badly during the second wave. And now when it comes to India, and when we look at the statistics, it says that the number of cases in India is increasing, especially in the state of Maharashtra, in the state of Punjab, and also in few pockets in Kerala as well. Apart from this, there are other states like Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, West Bengal, Telangana, and Chhattisgarh, where there has been an increase in certain regions. What are the possible reasons for this increase? The article in this particular case says one is the super spreader event, the other is the cluster. What is this super spreader event? First, we have to understand who is a super spreader. Let's say for example there is one of the events, let's say a marriage, or let's say for example there is a party, or let's say for example there is a meeting, or let's say for example a large number of people have entered one of the events. In this particular case there might be one person or there might be 2 to 3 people who they don't know that they have COVID-19, so they are asymptomatic as well. But because there is a large scale conversation that is happening in this particular place, there are no due precautions that have been taken. People are not having the social distancing, they are not wearing masks. In this particular case there might be one person or 2 or 3 who impact large number of people. So one single person impacting many people in that particular event is what is called as super spreader event. So who is a super spreader? One person or 2 person impacting number of people is a super spreader. And what is an event? So if it is a party, if it is a birthday bash or a meeting where large number of people have come together and this person impacts large number of people, that is what is called as a super spreader event. Apart from this, it makes a mention of what is called as cluster. What is this cluster? This is an aggregation of cases of that particular disease in a particular locality. Let's say for example there have been n number of example, let's say in Bengaluru in Karnataka. What happens? Let's say there is an apartment in a particular place. This apartment, they are again not balancing the social distancing, they are not wearing mask in a particular region when they are out. So one single person or a family might impact the entire apartment in that particular region. This is what is called as cluster. So a coronavirus cluster occurs when there is a concentration of infections in that specific area or that region at the same time. So when you have a particular locality or it's very small region impacting a particular section of the people, that is what is called as cluster. So according to this particular article, it goes on to say that the number of cases in India is primarily increasing. One is because of the super spreader events. It can be a birthday bash, or it can be a marriage incident, or it can be a meeting, or when people are partying and an asymptomatic person spreads it to other people. That can be one instance. The other happens to be the clusters. Now the important question is, why are these incidences increasing when it comes to states like Maharashtra, Kerala or in Punjab? The primary reason is because people's assumption. People currently believe that there was a high of COVID-19, it has dropped and now it is not impacting and it is constant. So because they are on an assumption that the worst phase of the pandemic is done away with, they are not taking all the precautions that which was being taken in the past year. Use of masks, hand sanitizers, washing the hands, these are some of the basic things apart from the social distancing. So because the people have started believing that the worst phase is done away and they are not taking all the precautionary measures, which is one of the reasons why we have such events that are occurring. Apart from this, when you consider the previous months, let's say last year, or let's say for example January or February, we have the state governments that had come up with stringent action plan. So they had an action plan and they also ensured that in case there are people who are violating it, they were supposed to pay penalties as well. So because they were to pay the penalties, because the people were scared and they had apprehension about this particular issue of penalty, people were to take all the precautionary measures. But currently what do we have is these protocols have been liberalized, which is why people are again violating some of the norms, says this article. Therefore the article says because of all these limitations and concerns, one from the people's side, the other from the government side, which is why we are seeing an increase of the activity of the COVID-19. Added to other problems, there are variants as well. Let's say for example, one from the United Kingdom, the other from South Africa, the other from Brazil as well. So what is happening? India does have the vaccine, but these vaccines might not be effective against the variants that have come from South Africa, UK or from Brazil. That is another major problem when it comes to increasing of what is called as COVID-19 cases. So what is the way forward? There are two options, says this article. One is that particular particular person gets impacted by COVID-19, he has what is called as immune system, which is activated immediately. Antibodies are produced. It is able to fight the COVID-19. One is that. The other is the artificial process called as the vaccine, where vaccine has to be administered to that particular person so that he becomes immune to COVID-19. So the article in this particular case speaks about fast tracking the vaccine process, giving it to as many people as possible, and at the same time we have to ensure that more testing is taking place in the country. As of now, not much of testing is taking place after the relaxation, so we have to upscale the testing and vaccines have to be provided. And meanwhile, social distancing, wearing of masks, and washing our hands and use of sanitizers should continue, says this article. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Artukal Pongala. This can be very important from your preliminary examination point of view from GS paper 1 culture. What is this Artukala Pongal? It is a 10-day festival that is celebrated at Artukal temple, where in Thiruvananthapuram in the state of Kerala. It is an all-women religious congregation at Artukal Bhagavati temple. Artukal Pongala is celebrated every year in the Malayalam month of Kumbam and falls in the month of February and March every year. What is this Pongala? Pongala is nothing but it means to boil over. It is a ritual in which women prepare sweet payasam. What is a sweet payasam? It is a type of sweet, that which is prepared by using rice, jaggery, coconut and plantains cooked together, and this is offered to goddess or Bhagavati. The minute this particular payasam is offered to God, it is said that that particular person's wishes will get fulfilled, and as a result they perform this particular puja. This temple is also known as the Sabrimala for women. Why? Since it is only for the women, that is why it is called a Sabrimala for women. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Channapatna toys. Do remember, this again is important from your preliminary examination point of view. Channapatna is a city and a taluk headquarters in Ramnagara district in the state of Karnataka. It is noted for its famous handmade wooden toys and hence popularly known as Gombegala Uru. What is Gombegala Uru? Gombe nothing but toy and Uru is nothing but a place. That is why it is called as Gombegala Uru or toy city of the state of Karnataka. This traditional craft is protected as a geographical indication. When it comes to the Channapatna toys, they are made of Alemara. What does Alemara stands for? It stands for ivory wood. It is colored with the vegetable dyes. These are environmental friendly toys and they line up the streets of Channapatna. The origin of wooden toys dates back to the period of Tipu Sultan, the ruler of Mysore, who was a great admirer of wooden toys. He took the initiative to invite artisans from Persia and train the local artists to earn the process of making the wooden toys. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about snow leopard. The snow leopard is also called as the mountain ghost. Where are the regions that these snow leopards are present in India? When you look into the western Himalayas, we have states like Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand and now the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir where they are present. In the eastern Himalayas, they are present in the region of Sikkim as well as in Arunachal Pradesh. What about the status of this particular snow leopard? When we look into it, the IUCN status is vulnerable. It is listed on Appendix 1 of the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species, which makes the trading of animal body parts illegal under this particular convention. Apart from this, the snow leopard is also protected under Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act. What have been the major threats when it comes to snow leopards? One is in reference to the hunting and poaching. Second is in reference to the human and animal conflict. So whenever there are livestock that are present in and around that particular region and the snow leopards come about eating these livestock, that is when there have been instances where the humans have even killed these animals as well. Apart from this, the habitat destruction following the infrastructure development in that particular region has also led to drop of this particular species. And the most important of all is the global warming. Instances of global warming is increasing and all those regions where this particular species is present is being impacted because of the increase in temperature. As there is increase in temperature, they have to move up to the terrain, which is what is impacting their food in this particular scenario. So these are some of the limitations and threats when it comes to the snow leopard. In order to overcome these issues, we have the government of India, which has been conserving snow leopard and its habitat through what is called as the Project Snow Leopard, which was initiated in 2009. India is also party to Global Snow Leopard and Ecosystem Protection, whose program has been happening since 2013, and the government of India has identified the snow leopard as a flagship species for the high altitude Himalayas. In spite of these programs, there might still be issues when it comes to the conservation. So what are we supposed to do? We have to rope in the local community. Only when we are able to rope in the local community, they do not engage in killing this particular animal, that is when safeguarding of this particular species can take place. So local communities have to coexist with this particular species. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is making a mention of what is called as Goldilocks zone or the habitable zone. What is this Goldilocks zone? The Goldilocks zone happens to be a habitable zone around the star. Let me give you an example. We have the solar system. This is the sun. We have Mercury, Venus, Earth, and also Mars. And finally, there are other planets as well. Let's say Neptune, and there are other planets like Pluto as well. What is this habitable zone? This is a zone where liquid water can exist in that particular region, which means to say it is not too hot or it is not too cold as well. Let's assume for a moment that Earth is very close by to the Mercury. Can liquid exist at that particular temperature? The answer is a no. Why? Because the sun is very close to the Mercury, and had the Earth been very close to the Mercury, the temperature of this particular region would be too high for the liquid to stay as liquid. What would have it become? It would have become steam in that particular place. And now let's take another position that Earth is close by to Pluto. Since the sun is very far away, since the sun is not able to give out the rays, since the solar energy or the solar power is not able to reach Earth, which is close by to Pluto, what we would have is ice and its crystals. Again, we would not have had the liquid. Instead, what we would have had is ice, which is where we have to understand a Goldilocks zone is a region where it is not too hot or it is not too cold, which is where there would be liquid and there can be presence of lives as well. That is what we have to understand in reference to the Goldilocks zone. The other part of the article is speaking about research. It might not be that important from the UPSC examination perspective. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Today we have essay that you have to write on the comment section. This essay has to be written in 1000 to 1200 words. First question, we have guided missiles and misguided men. Second question, a man is but the product of his thoughts. What he thinks he becomes. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review, give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.